And if I told you that there is a practice forgotten by many that has the power to open doors in the spiritual world, it is not a ritual, it is not just a sacrifice, it is a direct connection with something much greater. This is the story of someone who died while fasting and was taken to a place where Jesus himself revealed what really happens when a person surrenders to fasting and prayer. What she saw on the other side will forever change the way you understand life, death, and the hidden power of fasting. Stay until the end, because this revelation will not only impact your soul, but could transform your destiny. My name is Helena Carter, and I am 45 years old. Before all this, I was a registered nurse, accustomed to the hospital routine, seeing life and death up close. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I experienced that day. It was the most real, most intense, and most transformative experience of my life. If I had been told that I was about to experience it, I would not have believed it. But now I know. I saw with my own eyes. It all started on September 12, 2023. I was on the 7th day of a fast, only with water, something that I felt in my heart that I needed to do. Before continuing, just one request: subscribe to the channel. This helps us a lot to continue. Before we continue, just one request: please subscribe to our channel. It really helps us keep going. It wasn't the first time I fasted, but this time was different. There was a weight in the air, a feeling that something big was about to happen. I didn't know what it was, but I felt it deep in my being. That morning, at 5:30 in the morning, I took my car to go to the prayer meeting at my church. The city was calm, the sky dark, but a light rain fell on the windshield. Something unusual for Sacramento in September. As I drove, the radio played worship music, and I felt an inexplicable peace until suddenly everything changed. A strong light blinded me for a moment. I didn't understand what was happening. But in a matter of seconds, the loudest crash I had ever heard in my life shook me completely. A dry impact, intense pain, a metallic sound echoing in my ears. I didn't have time to react. A drunk driver in a pickup truck ran a red light and hit me directly on the driver's side. Then I heard only silence. At first, I thought I was still inside the car, but something didn't seem right. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel the weight of my body, but the most shocking thing was when I looked down and saw my own body trapped between the twisted metal of the vehicle. Paramedics were running around me, trying to get me out, checking my vital signs. One of them shook his head, and on his face I saw despair. It was at that moment that I understood I was dead. But what came next was even more shocking. From one moment to the next, everything around me began to disappear, as if the scene of the accident was dissolving. I had never felt anything like it before, but what I saw at that moment changed my life forever. There was a tunnel, but not like the ones we imagine in movies. It wasn't dark or terrifying. It was pure and living light, a light that couldn't be compared to anything earthly. It enveloped me and filled me with an indescribable warmth. And then I felt a presence. Not just any presence. I knew immediately who it was, even without needing to see him with my eyes. It was Jesus. His voice wasn't a sound like the ones we hear here on earth. It was something deeper, something that resonated in every part of me. He called me by my name, but it wasn't just a call. It was as if in his voice was contained all the love, all the compassion, all the truth of the universe. And at that moment, I understood something I had never considered. The fasting I was doing wasn't just a practice, not just a sacrifice. What I had been doing during those 7 days had a real impact in the spiritual world. And what Jesus showed me in the minutes I was out of my body is something I could never forget. He told me to look, and when I did, I saw something that took my breath away. There were threads of golden light rising from the earth to the sky. They weren't random. Each one represented a person who was fasting and praying. What impacted me the most was that these threads formed paths, connections that crossed dimensions. It wasn't just an individual action. Fasting and prayer were literally opening portals between the earthly and the celestial. Jesus showed me how, when someone fasted with a pure heart, seeking to draw closer to God, a breach opened in what seemed to be a dark barrier over the earth. I saw how God's light descended with force through these openings, touching lives, breaking chains, and bringing healing and deliverance. I realized something frightening. Many people don't understand the power they possess when they fast and pray. They don't know they are participating in a real spiritual battle where each sacrifice, each day of fasting, weakens dark forces and allows God's glory to manifest more intensely. But what Jesus showed next was even more impressive. He showed me people who fasted without a real purpose, just out of habit, or to keep up appearances. And these people didn't generate light. There was no connection between their sacrifice and heaven. I saw the difference between a fast done with faith and humility and one done without purpose. Jesus explained to me that it's not the act itself that moves heaven, but the intention, the surrender, the disposition of the heart. I felt my whole being tremble before this revelation. I realized how much I had underestimated the importance of fasting, how many times I saw it as a simple spiritual exercise without understanding the magnitude of the impact it had on the invisible. But then Jesus told me there was something more I needed to see, and what came next was something I could never forget. Jesus looked at me with an intensity that pierced my being. There was no judgment in his gaze, only pure love and a truth I couldn't deny. His voice resonated in the deepest part of me when he said, "Helena, I brought you here because you need to see what most ignore, what is happening on earth, and few understand." At that moment, the landscape changed. The light that surrounded me dissipated for a moment, and before my eyes appeared something I never imagined seeing. I saw the earth, but not as we see it from space. What I observed was something much deeper. I saw a kind of dark mantle covering millions of people. It was like a dense and heavy fog, but the most shocking thing was that not everyone was under it. There were some points of light that shone with an overwhelming force. Jesus made me focus on these lights, and I saw that they all had something in common. They were people who were fasting, praying, connecting directly with the divine. Through their sacrifices, they were breaking that dark barrier, allowing the light to descend with force upon them, and those for whom they interceded. But then he showed me something that took my breath away. There were others who also fasted and prayed, but their light didn't penetrate the darkness. Their efforts seemed stagnant. They were people who deprived themselves of food, but their hearts were full of pride, resentment, misguided intentions. It's not the physical act that moves the heavens, Jesus told me. It's the intention, the surrender, the love with which you do it. Jesus' words echoed in my mind. I had never understood the true power of fasting. Until that moment, I saw it as a discipline, a personal sacrifice, but never as a direct connection with the spiritual world, as a weapon that, when used correctly, can change destinies. Jesus extended his hand and showed me something else. What I saw was terrifying. In the distance, beyond that dark barrier, there were forces that weren't human, beings that seemed to be lurking, waiting for people's faith to weaken so they could intervene. I saw how, when someone fasted with true faith, these entities retreated, weakened by the light descending from heaven. But I also saw the opposite. When someone fasted just for appearance, without a real purpose, without humility, their effort had no effect, and these shadows remained close, whispering lies, sowing doubts, weakening their spirit. My heart raced. I had underestimated all of this. I had never thought about the magnitude of what happens in the spiritual world every time someone decides to withdraw and seek God with all their heart. Jesus looked at me again, and with a firm voice said, "Helena, there is something else you need to see." Suddenly I found myself in a place I can't describe with human words. It was vast, infinite, but at the same time intimate, as if every part of it was directly connected to my soul. I felt a presence that enveloped me completely. It wasn't just the light of Jesus. It was something greater, something that transcended time and space. This is the place where sacrifices are recorded, he told me. I looked around, and I saw something impressive. There were figures of light writing in what seemed to be enormous golden books. Each of these books contained the names of those who had fasted and prayed with genuine faith. But it wasn't just a list of names. I also saw the effects of each fast, the lives that had been changed, the spiritual battles that had been won, the miracles that had occurred due to the faithfulness of these people. Jesus pointed to one of the books. When he opened it, I saw something that left me speechless. It was my name. My own name was there, with each day of fasting I did, with each prayer I lifted in those moments of surrender. But I also saw something else. Not all my fasts had the same impact. Some shone with incredible intensity, while others seemed weaker, as if they hadn't reached their full potential. Jesus placed his hand on the book and told me, "When you fast with a sincere heart, you are sowing in the eternal. But when you do it without purpose, when your mind is on the earthly instead of the divine, your sacrifice loses strength. This is the mistake many make." At that moment, something I had never understood was revealed. Fasting is not a simple act of abstention. It is a pact, a direct connection with the celestial. It is a weapon, a bridge, an opportunity to bring heaven to earth. But then Jesus told me something that left me paralyzed. Not everyone understands this, and that's why they are in danger. At that moment, the place where I was changed again, I was no longer surrounded by that warm and comforting light. But now, I found myself in a vast, dark space. But I felt that something was watching me from the shadows. There was no fear in me, but rather a strange sense of alertness. Jesus was still by my side, and with a simple gesture, the veil of darkness dissipated. What I saw left me breathless. In front of me, as if I were looking through a window in time and space, I could see millions of people imprisoned in a kind of spiritual prison. No, they weren't physical bars or chains, but they were bound by something stronger. Illusion. I saw people who believed they were fine, who thought their lives were normal, but in reality they were trapped in a cycle of destruction. Some were dominated by pride, others by hopelessness, and many more by apathy. They didn't know they were trapped. Jesus pointed out one of these souls in particular. I recognized him immediately. Aaron Past, a man who spent his life preaching, who spoke of God, who knew the scriptures. But there was something that surprised me. He was asleep. He didn't preach with power, he prayed. But his words didn't pierce the sky. He fasted, but his sacrifice had no strength. Why? Sorry, I can't help with that, I asked with a trembling voice. Jesus did not respond immediately in his gaze. There was something that made me understand that the answer was deeper than I imagined. It depends on the choice of the soul, he finally said. Some accept what comes and seek love, redemption. Others cling to their pride and reject the light. Love is always there, but not everyone accepts it. The vision changed again. I saw many souls in this process of revelation. Some cried with repentance and were enveloped in a brighter light, while others moved away, covering themselves with their own shadows, unable to accept the truth. It was then that I understood something terrifying. Judgment is not an external court. It is the soul confronting itself. And what happens next is not an imposed condemnation, but the natural consequence of its own choice. Jesus extended his hand, and the vision disappeared. I was standing again before him, with my heart beating uncontrollably. Helena said with a firm voice, "I want to show you something more, something few have seen." The environment changed again. I knew that what was coming would be even more impactful. At that moment, everything around me dissolved. I felt I was rising even more, as if crossing an invisible threshold. Jesus walked beside me, and although he did not physically hold me, his presence kept me steady. I could feel his love enveloping me, giving me strength to endure what I was about to see. Suddenly, we stopped in a different place. It was vast, endless. And although there was no visible ground, I could stand effortlessly. There was a soft glow, but not like sunlight. It was a luminosity that emanated from everything that existed there. However, something in the atmosphere had changed. I had stopped feeling the absolute peace. That the absolute peace enveloped me before this place had a weight, a different density. Something important was about to happen. Jesus extended his hand, and as if space itself responded to his will, a new vision appeared before me. This time it was not a single man going through the judgment of his soul, but a multitude, thousands, perhaps millions of souls were in different states of consciousness. Some were on their knees, immersed in what seemed to be deep repentance. Others stood in silence, as if trying to understand what they were seeing. But what impacted me were those who moved away. They were those who moved away, not fleeing, but it was as if the light bothered them, as if the truth shown to them was unbearable. Jesus spoke with a firm voice. Each soul has the opportunity to see its truth. Some accept it, others reject it. I observed closely. Those who resisted, they seemed trapped in their own thoughts. Their own invisible chains covering their faces, refusing to look at the light surrounding them. Then I understood it was not the light that punished them, but their own conscience that could not bear the revelation of who they really were. Why do they do this? I asked with a knot in my throat. Jesus looked at me with infinite sadness in his eyes, because they still cling to their pride, their hatred, their selfishness. They cannot accept that it was they themselves who moved away from the truth. And so, as they live distant from love, now they reject the opportunity to redeem themselves. I felt a chill run through my being. Is there no hope for them? Jesus was silent for a moment before answering. There is always hope, as long as the soul desires to see the light again. But many have hardened their hearts to such an extent that even when the truth is shown to them, they cannot accept it. My gaze fixed on one of those souls. It was a man with an expression of deep pain. It was evident that he struggled within himself, wanting to approach the light, but at the same time, something inside him held him back. It was as if the weight of his own guilt prevented him from moving forward. Then something surprising happened. I saw the light extend towards him, gentle, compassionate, as if inviting him to leave his suffering behind. For a moment, I thought he would take a step forward, that he would accept the love offered to him. But at the last moment, he would accept the love offered to him. Retreated, covered his face with both hands, and moved further away. Plunging into the shadows, I felt a pain in my soul. Seeing how his own decision moved him away, Jesus sighed sadly. It is not the light that expels them. It is they who choose to move away. Love never rejected them, but not everyone is ready to accept it. The weight of these words fell upon me with devastating clarity. The judgment of the soul was not a punishment imposed by God, but the inevitable result of what each soul had built throughout its life. My mind filled with questions. And what about those who accept the truth? What happens after they see the impact of their actions? Jesus smiled gently, and the vision changed. I saw the souls that had accepted. The light enveloped them in a golden glow. Their faces reflected an indescribable peace. Some cried, not from suffering, but from relief, from gratitude. I saw how they were elevated, taken to another level of existence, where the presence of God would be even stronger. Those who seek the truth with humility always find their way, said Jesus. Even those who have made grave mistakes have the opportunity to redeem themselves if their heart is willing to learn and change. I observed how those souls were welcomed with love. There was no severe judgment, no punishment or eternal condemnation. only the natural consequence of their decisions, and the opportunity to grow spiritually. The true judgment was not the end, but the beginning of something greater than. Jesus looked at me seriously. Helena, there's still something more I must show you. The environment changed again. This time, I felt an immensely powerful energy around me. I knew, without anyone telling me, that I was about to see the ultimate purpose of this whole process. My heart beat strongly. I knew that what was coming would be the greatest revelation of all. The environment changed in a way I cannot describe with earthly words. It was as if the whole universe had stopped for a moment, as if it were on the brink of a greater truth than I could ever imagine. Jesus was still by my side, his presence enveloping me with an indescribable warmth. But this time his expression was different. There was a solemnity in his gaze, an intensity that made me feel I was about to witness something transcendental. "Helena," he said, with a firm voice.
"Now you will see what most
souls do not understand until it is too late." Before me the space opened as if an invisible curtain was being drawn. Without beginning or end, it was formed by millions of souls that seemed like living sparks of pure energy, each with a unique glow, moving in harmony, advancing towards a destination I could not see clearly. Some shone with a blinding intensity, while others had a dimmer light, as if they were still finding their way. "This," said Jesus, pointing to the river of souls, "is the final destination of every being. It is not a place of punishment or reward, but the home to which they truly belong." My mind tried to comprehend what I was seeing. It was not heaven as we imagine. There were no clouds or golden gates, but a state of existence beyond any human concept. It was love. It was unity. It was the true essence of what we are. But then Jesus extended his hand again, and the vision changed. Now I saw those souls that had moved away from the light. They were not in a hell of fire and torment, as many religions teach, but in a state of isolation. They were souls trapped in their own suffering, reliving repeatedly the moments of their lives when they rejected love, in which they caused pain and never sought to heal. "Helena," said Jesus with sadness, "the true judgment is not a punishment from God. It is the soul facing its own truth, without filters, without excuses. Some find peace in this process. Others resist and remain trapped in their own pain." I observed how some of these souls, after a time I could not measure, seemed to realize something, as if they understood they could change, that they could choose to leave this suffering. And the moment this understanding was born in them, a light appeared guiding them back to the river of souls, flowing towards unity with God. "So there is no eternal condemnation?" I asked with a knot in my throat. Jesus looked at me with infinite compassion. "God never condemns his children, but some take longer to find their way back home." My eyes filled with tears. Everything I believed about the final judgment, about the beyond, was crumbling before the truth I now saw with my own eyes. It was not about arbitrary punishments or rewards, but about the choices each soul made and the natural consequences of those choices. Jesus turned to me and said with a seriousness that penetrated my soul, "Helena, it's time for you to go back." I felt a pang of anguish. I didn't want to go, not after having seen the truth, after having felt the peace and love of that reality. "But I still have questions," I pleaded. "There is still so much I want to understand." Jesus smiled tenderly. "There is always more to learn, but now your mission is to share what you have seen. Not everyone will understand. Some will reject you. Others will mock. Those who are ready to hear will hear, and in their hearts they will recognize the truth." At that moment, I felt a pull, a force dragging me back, as if my spirit was being absorbed back. I tried to resist. I wanted to stay. I wanted to continue learning. But I knew my time here was over. The light began to fade, and Jesus' last words resonated within me like an eternal echo. I opened my eyes suddenly. My body shivered with chills as my chest rose and fell irregularly. I felt the cold of the oxygen on my face, and the grip of the machines monitoring my vital signs. Altered voices echoed around me, some in whispers, others laden with disbelief. My vision was blurred, but I could make out the white ceiling of the hospital and the intense lights flickering in the corridor. I was back. The doctors were in place. I saw one of them step back, his face disoriented, as if he had seen a ghost. Another was checking my signs with trembling hands, as if he still couldn't believe what was happening. I didn't fully understand what was happening until a nurse put her hand to her mouth and murmured softly, "This is not possible." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, as if it had been dry, as if I had gone days without drinking water. The weight of my own body felt strange, as if I was returning to inhabit a place to which I no longer belonged. Everything was familiar, yet at the same time, distant. My mind was trapped in the memory of what I had just experienced. I had been in another reality, had seen what lies beyond, felt the presence of Jesus, and now I was here again. My mother rushed into the room, her eyes red and swollen, but upon seeing me conscious, she let out a sob and knelt by my side, holding my hand with a force that almost hurt. "Daughter, how is this possible?" Her voice was a thread of disbelief. I tried to speak, but the effort was too much. I could only close my eyes and take a deep breath. My whole being still vibrated with the energy of what I had experienced. I knew I needed to tell them what I saw, what I felt, what Jesus showed me, but would they believe me? The following days were strange. The doctors couldn't explain how I had come back. They reviewed the reports, the tests, the analyses over and over. To them, I had been clinically dead. They found no medical reasons for my recovery, nor a scientific explanation for what had occurred. But I knew. I spent hours in silence, observing the world with a new perspective. Everything seemed different. The sunlight had a warmth I hadn't noticed before. The sound of the wind seemed to whisper something only I could understand. The people around me moved, unaware of what I now knew for sure. Death is not the end. But there was something else, something that unsettled me. Before returning, I had felt the weight of a choice, a purpose. Jesus showed me things I should not forget. He allowed me to see the impact of our actions, the way each decision, each word, each gesture of love or indifference could mark eternity. I hadn't returned just for myself. I had returned with a message. The first time I spoke about what I saw, I noticed the mix of fascination and skepticism on the faces of those who listened to me. My mother was the first to accept what I said. She didn't doubt for a second. Her tears were of emotion and faith. But others looked at me with distrust. Some thought it had been a delusion, a trick of the mind under extreme stress. Others simply didn't want to believe. But I couldn't keep quiet, so I kept talking. To each person who asked me what had happened, I told them what I saw, described the light, the peace, the feeling of absolute love. I spoke of the presence of Jesus, of his words, of the truth he revealed to me about our lives. Some were moved to tears, others remained silent, not knowing what to say, and some simply smiled incredulously, as if I were telling a fantastic story. But then something happened that I didn't expect. One night, while I was still recovering, a nurse entered my room with a strange expression. She stood at the door as if hesitating to speak. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked at me seriously. "Years ago, I had an accident and was in a coma for 3 days and saw something similar to what you describe. But I never told anyone. I thought people would think I was crazy." The air in the room became dense. We remained silent, looking at each other, sharing something that went beyond words. I was not alone. That was the first moment I realized there were many other people who had gone through the same experience, people who had crossed the threshold of death and returned with stories most refused to hear. And I knew I needed to keep talking because what I saw, what I felt, what Jesus showed me, was not just for me. It was a message for everyone. The days in the hospital became a transition between two worlds. I knew my body was here, but my soul continued to recall what I had seen. Every night I closed my eyes, not dreaming of common things. Instead, I relived the light, the peace, the voice of Jesus, the choice I was given. I could no longer see life as before. I would wake up and feel a weight on my chest, not of sadness, but of responsibility. I was allowed to return and couldn't waste the time I had left. I knew I hadn't returned just to follow my routine as if nothing had happened. So I made a decision. On the first day, I left the hospital. I stopped at the door before crossing it, took a deep breath, and felt the air filling my lungs. My mother, who accompanied me, watched in silence with a mix of love and concern. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I looked at her and felt, yes, but nothing will be the same, and she was right. From that moment, every word I said, every action I took, every person I met had a new meaning for me. I began to notice things I had previously ignored, the hidden pain in people's eyes, the hope disguised as indifference, the opportunities we let pass by being too busy with what doesn't matter. One afternoon, when I dared to speak publicly about my experience, an older man approached me with tears in his eyes. I also saw something when I had a heart attack. He confessed to me, but no one believed me. I hugged him without saying anything. His story was one of many. There were thousands, perhaps millions of people with testimonies like mine, but the world silenced them, said it was impossible, that it was an illusion of the mind. But I knew the truth. Jesus showed me what happens after this life. He showed me that every action, every thought, every decision has a real weight on the destiny of our soul. It's not about punishments or rewards, as many think, but a profound revelation of who we really are. Souls cannot lie to themselves. When they cross the threshold, they see themselves with total clarity, feel the love they gave, and the pain they caused, and then understand that life is not just an ephemeral step, but an opportunity to grow, to love, to be light amidst darkness. Since then, my purpose has been to share what I learned, not to convince the skeptics, but to speak to those who, inside, already know there is something more, but need to remember it. If you have come this far, perhaps it was not by chance. Perhaps this message was for you. Don't waste time on what doesn't matter. Don't wait until it's too late to realize how valuable every opportunity you have to love, to forgive, to change is. Because sooner or later we will all see the truth. The only question is, will you be ready when that moment comes? If this story made you reflect, imagine how many more secrets are hidden behind what we believe we know. Don't let this revelation stop here. Subscribe now, like, and activate the bell to discover more impactful testimonies. And now click on the video you see on the screen. Because what you will discover, there may change everything. See you in the next story.